At 9:18 in the evening on July 10th, President Trump posted to Truth Social. And what he wrote is unlike anything an American president has committed to in writing in the modern era of this conflict. 1,000 missiles are locked and loaded and aimed at the Islamic Republic of Iran, with thousands more to immediately follow should the Iranian government act on its threat to assassinate a sitting president of the United States. In this case, me. Orders have already been given and the U.S. military is ready, willing, and able for a 1-year period of time, subject to extension, to completely decimate and destroy all areas of Iran. 1,000 missiles, locked, loaded, aimed, orders already given. A 1-year operational window already authorized. Complete decimation of all areas of Iran is the stated consequence. That post did not emerge from nowhere. It emerged as a direct response to a statement that appeared from a Telegram account allegedly belonging to Iran's supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, a man who has not been seen in public in 135 days. A man whose Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, has confirmed on the record is wounded and likely disfigured. A man whose DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, testified to the White House Intelligence Committee was very seriously wounded following the February 28th strikes that opened the current phase of this conflict. A man whom Iranian state media has had to represent through what American officials assess are AI-generated video messages because the actual individual cannot or will not make a public appearance. That man, or whoever is operating his Telegram account from a bunker somewhere inside Iran, issued a threat. And then the President of the United States responded with 1,000 missiles and a 1-year operational order already signed. This is where the conflict stands on the morning of July 11th, 2026. And to understand how every element of the last 96 hours built to this precise moment, you need to go back and trace the chain of events that made a presidential Truth Social post about 1,000 missiles, not an escalation, but a logical endpoint. But let's back all the way up, because to understand the full weight of what happened last night, you need to understand the architecture of pressure that has been assembling across every dimension of this conflict simultaneously, and why the invisible Supreme Leader's telegram message arriving at this specific moment triggered a response that makes absolutely clear the American position has moved from calibrated military pressure to something categorically beyond it. The current phase of direct U.S.-Iran military conflict began on February 28, 2026. On that date, the accumulated weight of months of IRGC aggression against commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, vessel seizures, drone strikes on civilian mariners, repeated threats to the freedom of navigation that the international economic order depends upon, triggered a threshold American military response that transformed the nature of U.S.-Iran engagement from coercive deterrence to direct combat. The opening strikes of February 28th did several things simultaneously. They destroyed a significant portion of IRGC military infrastructure across the southern coastal regions of Iran. They degraded Iranian air defense capability in the regions adjacent to the Strait of Hormuz. And according to every confirmed American intelligence assessment that has entered the public domain since, they seriously wounded Mojtaba Khamenei, the man who had just inherited the title of Supreme Leader from his father, Ali Khamenei, and who had not yet consolidated either the institutional loyalty or the public legitimacy that his father spent 34 years building. What happened to the Supreme Leader in the February 28th strikes is not precisely known to the public. What is known is this: he has not appeared in public since 135 days and counting. His public communications consist exclusively of written telegram statements. Iranian state media has published video content purportedly showing him that American intelligence officials assess was artificially generated. He did not attend his own father's funeral in Mashhad, with the IRGC advising him the security environment was too dangerous, and 2 of the highest-ranking officials in the American national security apparatus, the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence, have stated on the record and under testimony that he is wounded and very seriously wounded, respectively. The entity at the nominal apex of Iranian state power is, by American assessment, a man who cannot or will not show his face, who may be disfigured, who communicates through written posts on an encrypted messaging application, and whose actual condition and decision-making capacity remain unverified by any independent party. This is the individual whose Telegram account issued a threat against the President of the United States. And that threat is what produced 1,000 missiles locked and loaded. What did the Telegram statement actually say? Because the specific language of it is analytically significant in ways that go beyond its surface belligerence. The statement reads, "These criminals whose names are known from top to bottom will take to their graves the unfulfilled wish of dying peacefully in their beds. The revenge is the demand of our nation, and it will most certainly be carried out. They should know that this does not depend on my personal presence. Remember that, or that of any other official. Whether we are here or not, this will be accomplished, and soon freedom-loving people throughout the world will each carry out part of this divine mission. break that statement apart at the structural level. The first sentence is a threat of death directed at named American and Israeli officials, a threat specific enough to reference knowing their names from top to bottom, and specific enough to reference the manner of death. They will not die peacefully in their beds. This is not rhetoric in the abstract. It is a specific operational threat about specific individuals. The second sentence, the revenge is the demand of our nation, and it will most certainly be carried out, frames assassination as not merely an IRGC operation, but a national mandate. This framing is important because it attempts to elevate the threat from a covert intelligence service operation to something with the legitimacy of national consensus, which simultaneously makes it more threatening and more obviously performative. And then the third sentence, read it slowly. They should know that this does not depend on my personal presence. Remember that, or that of any other official. Whether we are here or not, this will be accomplished. That sentence is not a threat against the United States. That sentence is a message to the Iranian population, to the IRGC's rank and file, and to the proxy networks that constitute the Islamic Republic's regional influence architecture. It is saying, when you eventually discover that the supreme leader is gone, that his personal presence is no longer a factor in the operation of the state, do not be alarmed. The mission continues regardless. The divine mission will be distributed among freedom-loving people throughout the world who will each carry out their part. Read that framing carefully. The statement is not projecting confidence in the Supreme Leader's continued operation. It is constructing a post-leadership operational framework, a theological and institutional argument for why the mission continues, even when the leader who gave it meaning is no longer present to direct it. This is precisely the kind of statement you write when you are preparing your audience for the revelation that the leader is not coming back. The freedom-loving people throughout the world carrying out their part of the divine mission is not a reference to principled Democrats abroad. It is a reference to the proxy network that the IRGC's Quds force has spent decades building across the region and beyond. The Houthi networks in Yemen, the Hezbollah infrastructure in Lebanon, the Shia militia networks in Iraq, and the cells and sleeper networks embedded in Western countries that have been the operational infrastructure of IRGC external operations for 40 years. The Telegram Post is activating that network without naming it. And the President of the United States responded the same evening with 1,000 missiles and a 1-year authorization to completely decimate and destroy all areas of Iran. Now map what has happened in the 96 hours surrounding that exchange, because the missiles and the Telegram Post did not materialize in isolation. They arrived on top of an operational picture that has been building in intensity with every passing hour. In the last 96 hours, U.S. Central Command has conducted 170 confirmed strikes on IRGC positions across the southern regions of Iran. 170. Bandar Abbas has been struck. Qeshm Island has been struck, confirmed by Iranian state media itself, which has not been able to deny the scale of what has been hitting its territory. FA-18E and FA-18F, Super Hornets off the USS Abraham Lincoln, have been the primary strike delivery platform. F-16CJ Wild Weasel variants, the aircraft specifically configured for the most dangerous mission in the strike package, the suppression of enemy air defenses, have been flying into Iran's most heavily defended airspace to clear the path for the strike aircraft behind them. Simultaneously with those military operations, the United States executed 2 economic actions of significant strategic weight. First, the oil sale license that had allowed Iranian crude to continue flowing under the framework of the now-defunct Versailles Memorandum of Understanding, signed on June 11, 2026, and supposed to form the basis of a ceasefire and diplomatic resolution, was revoked. That license was the last remaining commercial lifeline that allowed Iran to generate petroleum revenue from international crude sales. It is gone. Second, fresh sanctions were imposed specifically and personally on the financial network surrounding Mojtaba Khamenei himself. The people in his inner circle, the advisors, the financial intermediaries, the institutional managers of the Supreme Leader's personal wealth, and the IRGC's business empire that flows through that network, have now been individually designated and sanctioned. The targeting of the Supreme Leader's personal financial network is not a routine sanctions action. It is a signal that the United States has shifted from sanctioning Iran's state and IRGC institutional assets to sanctioning the personal financial interests of the individuals who are making decisions in the bunkers. That shift communicates something precise. We know who you are, we know where your money is, and the personal financial consequences of your decisions now fall on you individually, not just on the state you nominally represent. And then there's the 24-hour ultimatum. The United States has delivered to the Iranian regime a direct operational demand. Fully open the Strait of Hormuz within 24 hours, or face the consequences of not doing so. The nature of those consequences has not been spelled out in official public communications with the same explicitness that Trump's Truth Social post spelled out the assassination response protocol. But it does not need to be. 170 strikes in 96 hours, 2 carrier battle groups operating in the Gulf, and a presidential social media post about 1,000 missiles locked and ready provide the operational context that makes the 24-hour ultimatum's implied consequence self-explanatory. The USS Abraham Lincoln's Air Wing was actively loading ordnance and running strike drills as of this week, not standing down, not in maintenance posture, not in a reduced operational readiness configuration that would suggest a diplomatic pause was being honored. Loading ordnance, running drills. The crews that flew on July 7th and July 8th strike missions are the same crews and the same aircraft on the same ship that are now loading ordnance while a 24-hour ultimatum runs down. That operational posture is not ambiguous. Now go inside the weapons architecture that a 1,000-missile operation against Iran actually looks like, because the specific platforms and munitions involved in a strike of that scale tell you precisely what kinds of targets are being contemplated, and one category of target in particular changes everything about what this conflict is and what it is heading toward. The strike package architecture for a large-scale operation against Iran's most defended coastal and inland targets begins with the suppression layer. F-16 CJ Wild Weasel variants go in first. This aircraft exists for a single purpose: to find, locate, and destroy surface-to-air missile systems, so that the strike aircraft following behind it can operate without being targeted. The Iranian air defense network that these aircraft are flying into is not trivial. Russia-built S-300 systems, known to NATO as the SA-20 Gargoyle, provide long-range engagement capability. Iranian-built Bavar 373 surface-to-air missiles represent the indigenous long-range SAM that Iran has developed specifically to defend against American and Israeli air power. Multiple overlapping radar networks coordinate engagement across these systems. This is described by American pilots who have analyzed it as one of the most layered air defense environments in the entire Middle East. You do not fly into this environment and return without executing the suppression package in exactly the right sequence. Behind the suppression layer come the primary strike aircraft. Super Hornets off the Abraham Lincoln carrying a GBU-38 Joint Direct Attack munitions, the precision-guided bomb that converts a standard gravity weapon into a GPS-guided precision strike. AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles for coastal and naval targets, Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missiles, JSSM, which provide a long-range cruise missile capability that allows strike aircraft to engage heavily defended targets from outside the effective engagement range of the surviving air defense systems. F-15E Strike Eagles adding air interdiction capability, the ability to engage Iranian aircraft, ballistic missiles in the launch phase, and time-critical moving targets while simultaneously performing the strike mission. From below the surface, submarine-launched Tomahawk cruise missiles add a standoff strike dimension that requires no aircraft to penetrate Iranian airspace at all. Vertical launch. System cells on the carrier strike group's escort vessels contribute SM-2 missiles capable of ballistic missile defense, protecting the carrier and its aircraft from the Iranian ballistic missile launches that will inevitably accompany any large-scale American strike operation. The APKWS, the Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System, represents an economic asymmetry that has become operationally significant in this conflict. At approximately $20,000 per round, a single APKWS rocket used to intercept or destroy an Iranian drone costing $25,000 to $30,000 means the United States is generating positive cost exchange with every engagement of that type. When the scale of engagements is measured in hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles across an extended campaign, that cost asymmetry compounds into a structural economic advantage that Iran cannot reverse. And then there is the GBU-57, the massive ordnance penetrator, 30,000 pounds. Designed specifically to penetrate deep underground bunkers and hardened facilities. Trump stated this week that Iran faces a choice: either provide access to its nuclear program, nuclear dust in his formulation, or face very low-cost military options to ensure it remains buried underground forever. The GBU-57 is the weapon that makes that statement militarily credible. It is the only American conventional weapon with the penetration capability to reach underground nuclear enrichment facilities hardened to survive conventional strikes. A 1,000-missile first wave that includes GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators targeting Iranian nuclear enrichment infrastructure is a categorically different kind of strike from anything that has occurred in this conflict to date. It would represent the decisive military action against the Iranian nuclear program that American and Israeli planners have been building targeting packages for across multiple administrations. CNN obtained satellite imagery this week. Despite a U.S. government request to commercial satellite firms to not publish imagery of Iran, showing that Iran appears to be rebuilding nuclear sites, and moving surface-to-air missile systems to protect the most sensitive facilities in the Strait of Hormuz region. Iran knows what the GBU-57 represents. It is moving air defenses specifically to protect the facilities that weapon is designed to reach. That defensive repositioning confirms that the nuclear facilities are on the American targeting list for a 1,000-missile scenario. Both sides are signaling it. Neither side is pretending it is not on the table. Now map the 3 simultaneous pressure tracks converging on the Islamic Republic as of the morning of July 11th, 2026, because each track is operating at an intensity that individually would be the most severe pressure any of them has applied in this conflict's history. And all 3 are operating simultaneously. The military track has now been explicitly quantified at a scale that has no precedent in this conflict. 1,000 missiles locked and loaded, with thousands more ready to follow, constitutes a strike architecture whose scale would dwarf everything that has been executed in the last 96 hours. And 170 strikes in 96 hours is itself the most intense overt strike sequence of this conflict. The 24-hour ultimatum on the Strait of Hormuz provides the operational trigger mechanism. The carriers loading ordnance provide the demonstrated readiness that makes the ultimatum credible. The F-16CJ suppression packages, already proven effective against Iranian air defenses, established that the opening moves of a 1,000-missile operation would succeed in degrading the defensive layer that Iran has positioned to resist it. The economic track has reached the level of direct personal targeting that represents the final escalation ladder rung before full state asset seizure. Revoking the oil sale license eliminates the last remaining commercial revenue stream that the Versailles MOU framework had preserved. Personal sanctions on Mojtaba Khamenei's financial network hit the individuals, not the state, not the IRGC as an institution, but the specific human beings making decisions in the bunkers, in their personal financial capacity. The message is, we know your names, we know where your money is, and we are now making this personally costly to you as individuals rather than as officials of a state whose assets have already been extensively sanctioned. The diplomatic track has produced the most analytically significant revelation of the entire conflict, a revelation that CNN reported and that most mainstream coverage has not fully processed in terms of its strategic implications. Iranian officials speaking to CNN admitted that the ship attacks in the Strait of Hormuz came from an errant sect of hardliners within the IRGC who were attempting to undermine the diplomatic negotiations that the nominal leadership was simultaneously conducting through Qatar and Oman. Read that again. Iranian officials told a major American news organization that the IRGC operations that kept blowing up the ceasefire were not authorized by the entity that was negotiating the ceasefire. The entity making targeting decisions in the Strait was not responsible to the entity signing the diplomatic agreements. That admission changes the entire analytical framework for understanding this conflict's escalation dynamics. Now go inside the command structure that this admission reveals, because who is actually running Iran's military operations is the most important unanswered question in the current strategic picture. Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf is the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, former commander of the IRGC Air Force, and the man currently functioning as Iran's chief negotiator in the diplomatic track of this conflict. His public statement this week, "The era of bullying and extortion is over. We don't fold." Kalibaf is simultaneously the highest profile Iranian official engaged in the diplomatic channel and a former IRGC military commander whose institutional relationships run directly into the command structure of the organization, whose actions have been undermining the deals he is negotiating. His public hardline posture, "we don't fold," is not simply rhetoric. It is a man who cannot show any flexibility to IRGC generals who are watching every word he says for signs of capitulation, because any perceived capitulation would destroy whatever institutional authority he retains within the IRGC command culture. Kalibaf is the diplomatic face and the military intermediary simultaneously. Any agreement he signs carries whatever IRGC buy-in he can deliver, but his ability to deliver IRGC buy-in is precisely what is now in question, because IRGC Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters, the IRGC's main military command node, issued its own separate statement this week threatening Gulf nations that host American bases. Not a statement from the Supreme Leader, not a statement from the nominal chain of command above the IRGC, a statement from IRGC headquarters itself threatening sovereign nations with military action, issued in apparent parallel to and contradiction with the diplomatic track that Kalibaf is managing. General Hussein Salami, as the commander of the IRGC, and other senior IRGC military figures, appear to be operating with a degree of unilateral command authority over strike decisions in the Strait of Hormuz that is not fully coordinated with, and may be actively undermining, the diplomatic track that the nominal political leadership is managing through international intermediaries. Iranian officials admitted as much to CNN. The ship attacks came from hardliners trying to undermine negotiations. That is a confession of command fragmentation at the highest level of Iranian national security decision-making. The strategic implications of this fragmentation are profound, and they explain something about American behavior that has puzzled external observers throughout this conflict. Why the United States has not simply gone fully gloves off and executed the most comprehensive strike package available against all Iranian military infrastructure simultaneously. The answer, visible in the CNN reporting, is that the United States has been aware of and attempting to account for the split between the Iranian diplomatic track and the Iranian operational track. If there is a genuine faction within the Iranian system that wants a negotiated resolution, and that faction is being undermined by a separate IRGC command faction operating unilaterally, the optimal American strategy is to destroy the operational capacity of the undermining faction while preserving the possibility that the diplomatic faction can consolidate enough authority to actually deliver a deal. You do not obliterate both factions simultaneously if one of them might be the pathway to a resolution that avoids the full 1,000-missile option. But that calculation has a time limit, and the 24-hour ultimatum on the Strait of Hormuz suggests the time limit has been reached. The honest strategic assessment as of July 11, 2026, requires stating directly what the official American posture communicates at its plainest level. The Versailles Memorandum of Understanding, signed June 11th and supposed to provide the framework for ending this conflict, is effectively over. Trump has declared it so. The ceasefire is over. The oil license is revoked. The personal financial networks have been sanctioned. A 24-hour ultimatum on the Strait has been delivered. And 1,000 missiles are locked and loaded with a one-year operational order already signed and authorized, ready to execute at the trigger point of an Iranian assassination attempt against the American president. What the Trump administration is executing is a final stage pressure architecture with a visible escalatory endpoint. The diplomatic track is being maintained at the minimum viable level. Talks that Iran denies are happening. Messages being delivered through Qatari channels, not as a genuine negotiation path, but as the documented record that the United States exhausted every alternative before activating the full military option. The military track has been authorized to scale to 1,000 missiles with a one-year window. The economic track has hit the personal level. And the covert track, the mysterious explosions, the ground-level sabotage of weapons production infrastructure, has continued through every phase without interruption. The structural risk that sits at the center of everything is the command fragmentation problem that the CNN revelation made explicit. The entity that signs diplomatic agreements in Tehran is not the entity making operational targeting decisions in the Strait. That gap between whoever Kolobov represents in talks and whoever authorized the ship attacks that blew up the last ceasefire is the space in which the 1,000-missile trigger can be pulled not by the Iranian leadership that is negotiating, but by an IRGC general who is not. If a rogue IRGC faction authorized ship attacks to undermine ceasefire negotiations without authorization from the nominal chain of command, that same dynamic creates the possibility of an assassination attempt against the American president being authorized by the same kind of unilateral decision-making, an operation ordered not by the invisible supreme leader in his bunker, composing telegram messages about divine missions, but by a hardline IRGC general who has concluded that the assassination of the American president is the one action that could fundamentally disrupt the American military campaign and change the conflict's trajectory. Trump's one-year military authorization with instructions already given answers that scenario directly. The deterrence message is clear. Whether or not the Iranian leadership chain authorized an assassination attempt against me, the response will be the same. Decimate and destroy all areas of Iran, not the military zones, not the IRGC facilities, all areas. Whether that deterrence message is landing clearly in the mind of the IRGC general who may be making operational decisions independent of the Supreme Leader's Telegram account, that is the question that cannot be answered from outside the bunkers, and it is the question that determines whether the next 72 hours produce a diplomatic opening or the activation of a 1,000-missile targeting queue. On the night of July the 10th, someone operating a Telegram account in a bunker somewhere inside Iran posted a message about personal presence not mattering, about freedom-loving people throughout the world carrying out their divine mission, about criminals who will not die peacefully in their beds. And the President of the United States, at 9:18 in the evening, posted 1,000 missiles locked and loaded. Orders already given, a one-year window already authorized, complete decimation of all areas of Iran as the stated consequence. 2 messages, one from a bunker via an encrypted messaging application, one from the Commander-in-Chief of the United States military. The man in the bunker has not been seen publicly in 135 days. His condition is confirmed as serious. His state media uses artificial intelligence to show him appearing in public. He did not attend his father's funeral. His generals may be making operational decisions he did not authorize. The man on Truth Social commands CENTCOM, 2 carrier battle groups, 170 confirmed strikes in the last 96 hours, and 1,000 missiles already aimed and waiting for a reason to fly. Whether we are here or not, this will be accomplished. That statement from a Telegram account in a bunker tells you everything you need to know about where the Islamic Republic's command structure has arrived, and nothing about whether the person who wrote it has the institutional authority to prevent the event that triggers the 1,000 missiles, or even whether they know what their own generals are planning. The missiles are locked, the orders are given, the countdown is running, and the man who wrote the telegram message may not be in a position to stop what his generals might do next. What the confluence of these specific simultaneous developments, the telegram statement, the truth social response, the personal sanctions, the oil license revocation, the 24-hour ultimatum, the carrier air wings loading ordinance, reveals about the strategic moment is something that requires stepping back from the individual events and reading them as a system rather than as a sequence. The United States is not escalating in response to the telegram threat alone. It is activating a pressure architecture that has been building and pre-positioning across every dimension of this conflict for months. The 1,000 missiles are not being assembled tonight. They were assembled, targeted, and authorized in advance. The one-year operational window in Trump's Truth Social post was not improvised in reaction to a social media statement from a bunker. It represents a pre-built contingency authorization that already existed in the planning architecture of U.S. military operations against Iran and has now been made public as a deterrence signal. Making it public is itself an operational decision. You do not announce that 1,000 missiles are locked and loaded and orders already given because you want the element of surprise. You announce it because you want the deterrence effect of the adversary knowing, in specific and granular terms, what activating the assassination scenario produces. The deterrence logic works on two levels simultaneously. On the first level, it targets whatever rational calculation exists at the apex of Iranian decision-making. The visible nominal chain of command that includes the invisible supreme leader, Kalibaf as the negotiating face, and whatever senior IRGC leadership is coordinating with the diplomatic track. To those decision-makers, the message is, do not authorize an assassination attempt. The consequences are not a temporary American escalation. They are a full-year military campaign to completely destroy all areas of Iran. The cost-benefit calculation of an assassination attempt versus this consequence is not ambiguous. On the second level, and this is the level that matters more given what the CNN reporting revealed about command fragmentation, the deterrence targets whatever independent operational authority is being exercised by the IRGC factions that authorized ship attacks without coordination with the diplomatic track. Those factions, if the CNN reporting is accurate, are operating with some degree of autonomy from the nominal chain of command. Making the 1,000 missile authorization public communicates to those factions directly, not through the chain of command above them. An assassination operation, regardless of who authorizes it and regardless of what the nominal leadership says or doesn't say about it, produces the same consequence. The 1,000 missiles do not care whether the Supreme Leader's Telegram account authorized the assassination or whether a hardline IRGC general made the decision independently. The 1,000 missiles respond to the outcome, not the chain of command that produced it. That specific formulation, the response does not depend on who authorized the attack, only on the fact that it happened. Mirrors, almost exactly, the language in the Telegram post from the bunker. This does not depend on my personal presence or that of any other official. Both sides are operating on the same deterrence logic, but from opposite directions. Iran is saying, our mission continues regardless of our leadership's presence. The United States is saying, our response is triggered regardless of which faction in your command structure made the decision. The symmetry of those two positions is not coincidental. It reflects the fact that both sides have diagnosed the command fragmentation problem in Iranian decision-making and are attempting to construct deterrence frameworks that account for it rather than assuming a unified rational actor at the top of the adversary's chain. There is also the matter of what the simultaneous execution of economic measures alongside the military ultimatum tells you about the American strategy's evolution. Revoking the oil sale license and imposing personal sanctions on Khamenei's financial network on the same day as the 24-hour ultimatum on the Strait is not coincidental timing. It is a coordinated signal that the American position has moved from using military pressure as the primary tool with economic measures as supporting context to treating military and economic pressure as co-equal instruments applied simultaneously at maximum intensity. The personal sanctions in particular represent a targeting approach that has not previously been applied at this specific level in this conflict, going after the financial interests of the individuals in the bunkers, not just the institutions they represent. This matters because personal sanctions have a different psychological profile than institutional sanctions. Sanctioning the IRGC as an organization is something the IRGC command can absorb institutionally. It becomes part of the narrative of external persecution that the institution uses to sustain its internal cohesion. Sanctioning the specific individuals in the Supreme Leader's personal financial network means that the people in those bunkers making these decisions are now facing personal financial consequences that attach to their individual choices. Their overseas assets, their financial intermediaries, their personal wealth management structures, all of it is now designated. The cost of continued escalation has been personalized in a way that institutional sanctions cannot achieve. The Iranian parliament's move to fast-track legislation targeting Trump and other American and Israeli officials with a $100 million bounty is the regime's countermove in this personalization dynamic, attempting to create a mirror image of the personal stakes framework that American sanctions have established. But the asymmetry of these two instruments reveals itself clearly when you examine what each one actually produces. American personal sanctions against Iranian officials restrict their financial mobility, freeze their overseas assets, and create criminal liability for any financial institution that continues to facilitate their transactions. Iranian parliament legislation offering a bounty for Trump's assassination produces a Truth Social post about 1,000 missiles. The tools are not equivalent, the consequences they generate are not equivalent, and whoever is advising the Iranian parliament on the cost-benefit ratio of that legislation is not serving Iranian interests well. Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf's position at the center of the Iranian negotiating posture deserves deeper analysis than it has received in the coverage of this conflict, because his dual role, former IRGC Air Force commander and current chief negotiator, creates a structural characteristic that shapes every communication coming from the Iranian diplomatic track. Kalibaf is not a civilian diplomat who has been given a military portfolio. He is a military man who has been given a diplomatic portfolio. His institutional loyalties, his personal relationships, and his credibility within the IRGC command culture are military rather than diplomatic. This means his negotiating posture is constrained not by what he personally believes is the optimal diplomatic outcome, but by what the IRGC generals he came up alongside will tolerate him saying in public. Every statement Kalibaf makes in negotiations, every position he advances, every signal he sends about Iranian flexibility or willingness to consider terms, is being read by IRGC commanders who are watching for signs that their former colleague is surrendering the institutional position they have been defending with their missiles and their fast attack boats. The statement, "The era of bullying and extortion is over, we don't fold," is not Kalibaf expressing his personal negotiating posture. It is Kalibaf performing institutional toughness for the IRGC audience that is watching his every word, while simultaneously sending a communication to American counterparts that contains a structural signal. The fact that I am negotiating at all, despite saying we don't fold, is itself the indicator that there is space here. You read the public statement as signaling toughness. You read the fact of the negotiation as signaling that the toughness has limits. Whether that space is real, whether it is large enough to accommodate a deal that the American side finds acceptable, and whether Kalibaf has the institutional authority to deliver IRGC compliance with any deal he might agree to, these are the three questions on which the entire diplomatic track's viability depends. And the CNN revelation that ship attacks have been authorized by IRGC hardliners trying to undermine negotiations answers at least one of those questions with uncomfortable clarity. Kalibaf does not have the institutional authority to prevent the IRGC from undermining agreements he negotiates. The hardliners, willing to blow up ceasefire deals to preserve their operational autonomy in the Strait, are not under his command. Which returns us to the most important unresolved variable in this entire picture. If the IRGC command fragmentation is real, and the Iranian admission to CNN confirms that it is, then the 24-hour ultimatum on the Strait of Hormuz is not being delivered to a single decision-making authority that can comply with it. It is being delivered simultaneously to a diplomatic track that wants to comply and a military operational track that has demonstrated the willingness and capability to undermine compliance. The ultimatum's success depends on which track prevails in the internal Iranian contest between those two positions in the next 24 hours. The IRGC generals who authorized ship attacks to undermine the last ceasefire are the same people who would need to stand down from Strait of Hormuz operations to allow the ultimatum's demand to be met. Whether the 24-hour window provides sufficient time and sufficient internal Iranian political pressure to force that stand down, or whether the hardline faction sees the ultimatum itself as an act of extortion that must be resisted, that internal Iranian contest is what determines whether the next development in this conflict is a diplomatic opening or the activation of the largest American strike package in this conflict's history. Well, on the morning of July 11th, 2026, 170 strikes have been confirmed in the last 96 hours. The Abraham Lincoln's Air Wing is loading ordnance. The personal financial networks of the invisible Supreme Leader's inner circle are designated and sanctioned. The oil sale license is revoked. The Versailles Memorandum of Understanding is effectively dead. The 24-hour clock on the Strait of Hormuz is running, and somewhere in a bunker, composing telegram messages about personal presence not mattering and divine missions being distributed among freedom-loving people around the world, is the man who has not been seen publicly in 135 days, wounded possibly disfigured, possibly represented by AI-generated video when his state media needs to show him alive, who may or may not have the authority to stop what his own generals are planning. 1,000 missiles are locked, the orders are given, the window is authorized for 1 year. Whether we are here or not, this will be accomplished. That was the telegram post. That was the threat from the bunker. The question that no intelligence report can fully answer, no satellite can observe, and no intercepted communication can definitively resolve is whether the man who wrote those words, or whoever is writing in his name, has enough control over his own generals to prevent the action that triggers the 1,000 missiles he can probably see coming. The missiles are aimed, the window is running, and the bunker is silent.